everyone, welcome to Flexibility Script. This video is going to be going into an exercise for our shoulder that helps address its mobility. We're going to be exploring all the ranges of motion that our shoulder has. So bringing the arm up and behind us and around us, internally rotating, externally rotating. The exercise is called a shoulder CAR, C-A-R, stands for Controlled Articular Rotation. There's CARs for pretty much every single joint in our body, and it's just a nice scientific way to say a controlled joint circle, where we're trying to really control and own all our ranges of motion and kind of putting some tension through our ranges of motion as we go through the circular pattern in order to help create some strength in each and every single one of our joints. And in this video specifically, we're going to be addressing our shoulder. This position we're going to be in is a side lying position, so you're going to find yourselves lying on your floor or on a mat, and I usually will have the bottom arm supporting my head. You can also choose to have a pillow supporting the head as well. My knees, I'd like to have them out in front of me. They can be straight, but that usually puts a little bit more load through my upper body, so it usually feels a little bit more comfortable to have the knees out in front. Now, this arm here is the one that I'm going to be taking through a nice circular pattern. Main thing we want to make sure is that our elbow stays nice and straight all throughout. That way we know this humerus, this is the arm bone here, is doing all the work with rotating and doing that circular pattern, and not our elbow trying to compensate for it. The other thing to be mindful of in addition to our elbow is our torso. There's going to be a want of our torso to want to rotate back or rotate forward in place of our shoulders. So we want to be really mindful of making sure that when we reach forward, or more specifically, it tends to happen when you reach back behind, that there's going to be a want to open back. Do your best to not let that happen. What's going to happen here, I'm going to have my hand, I'm going to get nice open fingers, and I'm going to start with my palm facing the camera here, facing out. Nice and slowly, I'm going to be bringing the arm up. As I bring the arm up, I'm going to turn just slightly so the thumb leads the way back. Bring the arm up overhead, and I begin finding an endpoint where it's like, oh, I can't go back any further. Once I find the endpoint, I begin turning the hand inward in an internal rotation as I keep reaching it back behind me. As I keep reaching it back behind me, I keep internally rotating the hand in as I slowly make that circle, bringing the arm right back to hip level. Now when I come back to hip level, my palm is facing up towards the ceiling and my thumb is pointed back behind me, so I'm in this internally rotated position. From here, my thumb is going to lead the way back. Same thing here, I'm going to find an endpoint where I can't go back any further. When I find the endpoint, I rotate out of that. So externally rotate, I keep trying to make that circle nice and big, slow and controlled, coming back down to the starting position. Now, one thing I forgot to mention is that as I go through this, that I want to make sure I'm exploring all pain-free ranges of motion. So if I get to this point here and it's like, ooh, that doesn't feel very good, I can make that circle be a little bit smaller and it can come out a little wider as I begin internally rotating, doing the same thing, but instead of the circle being as big as I can make it, I can limit that range of motion as I go through the circular pattern to make it a little bit kinder, and making sure that I'm exploring all the ranges of motion in my joint without it being painful or uncomfortable. I can kind of bypass them as I go through, and slow and controlled. I'm going to go one more time, and I'm going to call out all the ranges of motion that we're going into. This first one, I'm coming up into shoulder flexion. When I'm bringing the arm up overhead, I find that endpoint in shoulder flexion, and I begin internally rotating as I reach it back behind me, and I keep rotating as I bring it back behind me, bringing it all the way back to the side. So by the end, my thumb is pointing back behind me, my palm is turned up towards the ceiling. From here, I keep that internal rotation, and I find the endpoint in shoulder extension here. I find that endpoint, and I'm going to begin externally rotating out of it. I keep trying to make that circle nice and big without letting my torso fall back. And I slow and controlled come back down to finish that circular pattern, coming back to the starting position. I'm going to repeat. I'm going to do the same thing, but to the other side. So again, I'm going to find myself in a side lying position. Once I'm here, palm faces forward, slow and controlled, about 10 to 50% tension coming through. Thumb leads the way back. Once I find my end point, I'm going to begin internally rotating as I reach back behind me. Keep internally rotating till I'm right back, right next to my hip. Thumb faces points the way, leading me back. I find that end point in shoulder extension. Externally rotate, coming up overhead, making a circular pattern and back to the starting position. Elbow stays nice and straight all throughout. And again, if at any point in time I find that I'm getting a little bit sticky, or a little uncomfortable, I should say, in any ranges of motion, I can make the size of the circle be a little bit smaller. Slow and controlled coming back. I find my endpoint in extension, and I externally rotate, bringing the arm right back up overhead. Slow and controlled coming back to the starting position, and then one last time. Elbows stay straight. I come up, then I'm going to let that thumb lead the way back. I find my endpoint. I begin internally rotating, maintaining that torso staying nice and square straight ahead. Keep making the circle as big as possible, like you're trying to reach the wall behind you. I find my end point and then reverse. Thumb leads the way back. I'm internally rotated. Now I externally rotate as I keep making that circle nice and big, bringing the arm up overhead, slow and controlled all the way down. When you're done, once you finished one especially, you should feel a nice blood flow coming through to the shoulder joint, and it should feel like it's a little bit more mobile and yet at the same time stable, like there's blood flow specifically to the area. The tension that you were creating through the ranges of motion is a bit of a strength stimulus to help strengthen all the ranges of motion in that shoulder. This exercise comes from the world of Kinstretch, specifically functional range conditioning, which is a nice world of mobility exercises that really focus in on creating strength through our ranges of motion with all the work that's done. These are great for warm-ups and great also assessments to see where you may be lacking in ranges of motion, especially in the left to right. So give it a shot and enjoy.